Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by our friends at Truman's, a company that's taking the clutter out of cleaning. Seriously, have you ever noticed the hundreds of single-use cleaning bottles filled with toxic ingredients at the store? Well, Truman's is fixing all of that with a lineup of non-toxic cleaners and refill cartridges. Check them out at trumans.com. And on today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, the topic of making comments about your former employer, whether it's the company or your boss. Now, you've heard me mention on this podcast, if you're a Riderflex podcast listener, you've heard me mention many times, never speak negatively about a former employer, whether it's the company or your boss, ever. Never. It's just never a good idea. You've heard me say that, but I want to go a little deeper. What do I mean really by negative comments? Let's dive into that a little bit, because I think some of you hear me say that and you're thinking of the obvious stuff, right? Like when you say something like, I hated my boss, or my boss was an asshole, or the executives are psycho, or something like that. I think you guys hear me say, don't speak negatively about your former employer, and you're just assuming that I'm talking about these really direct, clear statements that you could definitely define as negative. Let's go a little further and talk about the comments that could be perceived as negative and possibly put you in a bad light, even if you don't mean for it to. That's what I want to talk about on this episode. Now, before I get into those examples, just keep in mind, I want to emphasize, never speak negatively about a former employer, ever. Ever. I don't care how bad the situation was. I don't care what happened. It just doesn't matter. No matter how hard you try to explain it or whatever, it's just going to come out wrong. It's going to sound bad. Okay. No matter how hard you try to defend it or whatever kind of spin you put on it, I'm just telling you, my advice to you is never say anything negative, period, ever. I don't care what happened. I don't care if the CEO was psycho and went to prison for doing something crazy. Like, just never say anything negative, period. Okay, now back to the examples that I want to give you for this episode. Here are the comments I hear people make sometimes that could put you in a bad light, right? The listener could perceive you as a problem child or as a negative person. Ready? Here are some examples. When you say things like, well, the company was going in a different direction and I just, really didn't agree with it. Or you say something like, well, there was a change in management and I really just, didn't really see eye to eye on some of the decisions they were making. Or when you say something like, well, we just had differences of opinion on the strategy of the company. Or you say something like, I had a great boss there, but then I got a new boss and, we just didn't really see eye to eye on things. So I felt like it was time for a change. Or you badmouth the benefits or the vacation time or something like that. Like a little, what I would call just a little nudge, right? Where you're just barely touching the surface of what I would call negative, but it's there. Any comment that could be perceived as you disagreeing or not getting along with somebody or having some drama, any comments that even come close to touching that, just stay away from it. I'm telling you, just stay away from it. It's never a good idea. I don't care how you try to spin it. It's never a good idea. Now, what would I say? How would I answer the questions about my former employer? Here are several examples that I think you should use. I really enjoyed my time at ABC Company. They were very good to me. They gave me lots of opportunities. I learned a lot there. Nothing bad to say about those folks whatsoever. In fact, I wish them the best. I would just like to make a change. And I'm really interested in your company, XYZ, and here's why. Boom, there you go. See how easy that was? That's it. Something like that. Something where you just compliment and say thank you to where you were or where you're at, but you're thinking about making a change. Hey, I really enjoy my time here at ABC Company. It's a great place. They've been awesome to me. I wish them the best of luck. I'm just ready for a change. And I saw your opportunity, and boy, you guys are doing great things at XYZ Company, and I would really love to work there. Here's why, and here's how I can help your company. That's it. You see how easy that is? Just never tie it to a negative, okay? Ever. Just keep that in mind. Practice how you answer the question, and then ask yourself, could it be perceived as negative in any way whatsoever? I think some of you think it's like if there's a strategy in your head to say something like, well, I just didn't agree in the vision of the company, and I thought really this should go in a different direction, and I had a disagreement with management. I think some of you think that's a good idea to highlight that, like because you're super smart and maybe the management team wasn't or whatever. No, it's never a good idea. Don't do that. Compliment where you were or where you're at, okay? And express how much you want to go to work for the new company and why. And there is your Riderflex tip of the day. The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.